Okay, I'm going to go back a little bit to something we've already talked about.
All right.
How much, let's see, how prevalent do you think burnout is in ministry?
I think it's more prevalent than we know, because
You mentioned it because most people who identify with their ministry put themselves on an island.
yeah,
And I think a vast majority of pastors, ministers are on that island.
sure. I think you just read the stats. I haven't been in this world for 5 years, so maybe the stats have turned around. I don't think they have.
I don't think they have.
But at the time, I think it was like there were more people quitting ministry than going into ministry. At one point, it's still probably the case. So I think it's very prominent, or prevalent is probably the right word there. But I don't think it's identified. I don't think that the majority of people feeling burnout are calling it that. Because here's the thing, we were also taught this. I've heard this many times from the pulpit, that if you're experiencing burnout, it's because you're in pride, or you're sinful, or a series of different things. So nobody wants to call it burnout, whether that's a true statement or not.
Right.
Nobody wants to call it burnout because it then identifies them as failing, as having some sort of issue. Well, okay, don't identify it and pay the consequences.
Yeah, because I was going to say, not identifying it typically results in a much worse situation than if you do identify it and deal with what's causing it.
Right.
Where do people who spend their whole lives in ministry deal with, maybe I was wrong about this?
Be more specific. Wrong about what? The ministry?
About
or
being called.
The called?
Maybe I was wrong about this call.
My first, after I left the first church I worked at, I was there for 3.5 years. And I went to work with a friend of mine in a church plant. And I asked him one day, I said, do you believe that it's possible to faith your way into a calling? And the thought process was, if I believe that I am made in the image of God, and God, I'm not God, but I'm made in his image, so I should have pretty much all of the same qualities. And there's a lot of scripture to back these things up, but I can speak. I mean, life and death is in the power of the tongue. Is a good example. Mm-hmm. God spoke the world into existence.
James.
I can speak things and see things, and this is how humans are created. The proof of that in science would be the placebo effect. If I believe something, it tends to come to pass. It's not a magic formula. It's not a spell, but it is relevant and scientifically provable. All that just to say, if I spend my life believing I'm called to be a worship leader, and I keep seeing myself as a worship leader, I'm probably just going to become a worship leader. And the thing is, so yes, do I think that a person can find themselves and go like, oh, I don't even know that I was ever called to this? Yeah. I don't think, let's take me, for example. Let's just say I was never called to be a worship leader. Yeah, I spent 25 years doing it. Was it pointless? Did it serve no purpose? No, that's not the case. I think I was called to do that. I don't think my calling changed. I think my calling grew. And it changed because I used to say the most natural place for me to be was behind a keyboard singing. I was always in a comfortable space. I never felt like I'm not an extrovert, right? And so my wife is not an extrovert. And she could never understand how I'm comfortable just getting on a stage. I am far more comfortable getting on a stage. I could do that in front of 50,000 people and not break a sweat.
If you're hiding behind a keyboard.
If I'm behind a keyboard, that was my thing, is like none of that ever mattered. I mean, I've got to lead worship. I've not done a lot of it, but I've done it a couple times in the last couple of years, and for conferences, and they're for pretty big name people. And so I don't think about that in terms of like, oh man, I'm doing this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just get up there and do what I'm comfortable with. But what I found interesting is, the first time I podcasted, either side of the mic, didn't matter if I was hosting or just a guest, was the only other time I felt at ease like I do playing keyboard. And I was surprised by that because for me, as we kind of alluded to earlier, I don't need prep. I don't concern myself at all. Because I'm in the process of going from a shaved head to long hair. The only thing I was concerned about was what this mop looked like. But I got over that pretty quick too, so it didn't matter. But I think that's the thing. Because I'm very comfortable in sharing. Like, I don't have any secrets. I don't hold back. And I'm just going to tell people, tell you what you want, what you're asking me, and let the chips fall.
Yep. That's the way you got to go do it. That's the way you got to do it. I thought of what I was going to say.
Okay, good.
We were talking about trust.
Remember that. I just want to say the reason that last thing made sense is this. My point is my calling evolved. I don't think it changed.
Right.
Anyway, go ahead.
And that's sort of where I was going with this, is that I don't believe in failure. I believe I can make mistakes and I can forget to focus, or I can whatever. I don't believe that I've failed, because in my mind, failure is an opportunity to trust God, or what we perceive as failure is an opportunity to trust God. And so I make a mistake, I examine it, and I say, how can I make this better next time?
Yeah.
And so I trust God enough to sort of cover my mistakes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that has to do with what we were talking about.
Well, I mean, I think that we all have to cope.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we all have to cope. I don't have I have no problem thinking about failure in the more traditional sense and going, yeah, I failed this task or that. There's total failure, and then there's I failed at this.
Yeah.
You go buy a car, you maybe failed at getting as good a deal as you could. To your point, you do learn from it.
Yep.
Right. So I don't see any problems with it. In fact, I used to say failure is not an option; it's a requirement. And and what I meant by that was to learn. You can't learn if you don't fail.
Yeah, but then it's not failing.
Well, right. That's what I'm saying. You're positioning it in a thing we've already agreed doesn't exist in the future.
Yeah.
Also, we agreed that the past doesn't exist, so failure doesn't happen. I've never failed in this moment.
In the now.
now.
I've never failed in the now.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's perspective, but ultimately, I mean, failure should never be your thing that's holding you back, right? It should be the thing that's helping you grow. That's kind of the big picture position I hold anyway.
Okay, you've already answered this. But I'm going to ask it anyway, and then you can
say I already answered it. Okay.
Yeah. How has your life changed since you left, quote unquote, full-time ministry?
I've already answered that.
Answer it again, because I have the memory of a chicken.
Oh, that's fair. Okay. How has my life changed? Well, I'll tell you one thing, and this is really weird, and this is just me telling you how it has been. I didn't realize the weekend consisted of 2 days, and that's been pretty awesome.
That's pretty basic.
It's so basic, but I'm just going to tell you, it is amazing.
Yeah. And had you asked me, I would have told you.
Well,
that the weekend is 2 days.
But here's what's so funny about it.
Sometimes 3.
It really got me thinking of that passage that says the Sabbath was created to serve man, not for man to serve the Sabbath.
Wow.
Because I thought to myself, wow is right.
Yeah.
How many times I'm like, I've only got 1 day to get everything done. You know what I mean? Like, it's so stressful. And the fact that my wife and I wake up every day, I wake up on the weekends and you don't feel like you got to rush around to do anything. It's really cool. Mm-hmm. Now that would imply that we don't go to church anywhere, and that's accurate. One of the things I have found, this is another interesting shift. I probably will never go to church again. I'm not anti-church. Part of the reason I will probably never go is it would require me to lie, and I don't want to do that because there's not a place that I can go where ultimately I'm not going to be pressured to plug in and go back to what I've done.
Yeah.
And I know
That's fair.
Because here's the thing, even if I went to a whole nother state, at some point I will get into a relationship. Impossible not to.
Mm-hmm.
When I get into that relationship, and let me rephrase it a different way. It's not impossible not to. If I don't get into a relationship by going to a church, why am I even going? Like, that's the point. At some point they're like, oh, so what'd you do? What do you do for a living? And what did you, we're going to learn things about each other.
Yeah.
And when they learn that I spent 25 years in full-time ministry as a worship leader, they're going to be like, have you ever thought about joining our worship team? And I would say, no. And that would be fine for a while.
Yeah.
Then one day something will happen and like, Jeremy, it's just going to pull you in. And what I know is I don't like this, but the church isn't going to church on Sunday morning. We know this. Like, everyone who's listening knows this. The church is the body of Christ.
That's exactly right.
So, we also know, forsake not the assembling of yourselves together, right?
Yeah, but that's
Hebrews.
totally out of
I know
context.
it is.
Yeah.
I know, and I'm glad you were going to jump on it.
Yeah.
But you can have that argument with somebody, as opposed to having that argument. I say, I do not forsake the assembling of myself together.
Right.
I intentionally get together with like-minded individuals on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
And we spend time communing. I remember the last time we go to dinner with a couple. Every week we go to multiple dinners almost every week, but on average we go once a week with one couple specifically. And I tell them, I said, this is exactly what Jesus said at the Last Supper. He says, often as you do this, do it in remembrance of me. And I said, I want to tell you guys, like right now, it's only through Christ that we have this relationship. Now, we weren't in church. We were sitting at a Mexican restaurant, right? But the reality is, I was doing that, and I wanted us to talk about it because we're doing that in remembrance of Christ and what he did for us. We're in these relationships. We have this life that we're living as a result of his work, and our works are null and void. We don't do anything. We accept and receive and dwell in that space. And I'm like, man, this is great. So I don't forsake the assembling. I'm not anti-church, but I do know that the vast majority of churches today are going to pounce on skill sets to try to further their corner of the kingdom, which isn't real, in my opinion.
Well, I would use the word agenda, but you're nicer than me.
I am nicer than you. That is not even subjective. Everyone knows that. Even you.
Even me. I admit it freely. Most of the time.
When I'm here.
When you're in front of me. When your back's turned, no.
What a jerk. I knew it.
What would you do differently if you could go back?
Nothing. I wouldn't do anything differently. I would be more attentive, which isn't really doing anything different. Everything. I feel like I've missed so much of my life looking to the future. I missed moments.
Okay.
Right.
So I was going to say, do you have regrets? And you just said you do.
Yeah, I absolutely have regrets. I have, I shouldn't say nothing different. I probably have a handful of things I would absolutely do different because they caused hurt and pain and on others. I wouldn't change what happened to me. I would change what I've done to others. Yeah. If that makes any sense.
And here's the good news. You can't.
I can't, right.
You can't do anything differently.
Yeah. But the reason being is I'm a product of all that, and I am comfortable with who I am, so I wouldn't want to change that. And probably most importantly, my wife fell in love with me, so if I changed me, I wouldn't have her, and I couldn't not have her.
Yeah. Could not have her.
I couldn't not have her. Yeah. So whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've gone through experiences where I spent my whole first 50 years of my life, all I wanted to do was to be an artist.
Yeah,
was to be a painter. That's all I wanted to do. And I got there, and I spent energy and money and emotion, and I got to a point where I achieved part of the goal of being a painter, a landscape painter. And then one day God says, that's over.
Right.
And I go, what do you mean that's over?
He says, you suck. Get out. What do you mean? What do you mean? Look at what you just painted. Not true. I love your paint.
I know you do. And he said, I used that to get you here.
Yeah.
Where you can listen to me and I can tell you what I want you to do next.
Yeah.
Now that was 10 years ago, 11 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing this and I love this. The energy that I used as a painter just transferred right into writing content.
Right. I've said this before too, and I said, God made. So we're in Oklahoma City, and we're about 2.5 hours from Dallas, Texas, and so I've often told people sometimes God calls us to Dallas by way of Anchorage, Alaska, and the reason being, as I've come to know it, is. Yeah, he wants me to go to Dallas, but he doesn't tell me I'm taking you to Dallas because he knows I'm going to get on the interstate and head straight down I-35.
Yeah.
And he wants me to head to Alaska because there is things there that are going to help me and I'm going to help others. And it's a journey. I mean, that's the moral of that story, right?
Journey, yeah.
It's a journey, and it's not the destination that matters. It's the journey. The destination is a singular moment in time. The destination is the collective body of work of your life.
Yep.
So tell me what's more important.
The journey.
The journey.
Yep.
That's the 99.999999999% of your life is the journey, and the end is just the 0.000001%.
Yep.
So of course the journey is the more important piece. Of course it is.
So learn to enjoy it.
100%. And that's why I say that I would just observe. Yep. And I feel like I actually learned at a pretty young age to do that, but learning to do it and doing it are two different things.
Yep. Wow. One more question.
7. Yes. I just figured that was the answer. Maybe not.
I was going with Jesus.
7. That was close.
There you go. What would you say to a young person who's believed he has been called to ministry?
I don't know that I'd say anything to them. I'd ask them a lot of questions. I would ask them questions that would cause themselves to ask themselves questions.
Well, actually, you answered by talking about the journey.
Okay. I like my answer I just gave, but okay.
Oh, yeah. I like both of them. I like both of them.
Well, no, I mean, I would say, first thing is I feel called to this. I say, tell me about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I do that all. It's not what I would say. I do that all the time.
And I think a really important question is, what do you think makes you qualified to do that? Well, God called me. Okay. What makes you qualified to do that, to answer that call? I was not qualified.
Right. Yeah, nothing qualifies me.
Yeah.
In my opinion, nothing qualified Moses, and nothing qualified Abraham. In fact, they were disqualified. The qualification is to be disqualified by human standards. That's biblically what I can point to.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, but I honestly, I think that's the thing, because here's the deal: that we live in a complicated Christian world. We didn't have this during Christ's day. They didn't have this.
No.
We have a overlay of fraudulent. It's counterfeit to what Christ is and who He is. And this overlay of feeling good about yourself, feeling right and good. So like we come from a space of grace, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we pull that away and put it to the side for a minute, and we just go back to performance for a second, because I think doing that helps us understand where we are. Most of these churches are laying out circumstances to help people make it easy for them to perform, to feel right. And the problem is they never get to the point of recognizing that no matter what they do, they're never going to be right. And it's that recognition that actually brings peace, because that's when you realize that it's a free gift. We verbalize it all the time. Christendom right now says all the right things. They don't live it. You don't see it in their actions. If I'm justified by what Christ did, if there's nothing I can do to earn it, then why is there a pressure on me to give you something of my time, of my gift? Why do you say I have to do this, or I'm not really this? It's the beneath your breath kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if we step out of that role, this is the problem. So now that's why I ask questions. When someone feels called, I want to go, okay, are you called, or did someone say you need to be called or you're going to hell? They didn't say it like that, but you know what I mean?
Right.
Like they lay it out in such a stressful way. And I know this because when I was a kid, every moment was searching for your calling. It was, man, we really need to pray that, and you get to the end of youth service and you got the youth pastor, man, God, we just love you so much, God, and God, and just, I want these teenagers to feel the call. They need to know what they're called to do. So right now, just speak peace in their life and let their hearts be opened up to hear you say what they're called to do. Man, when you hear a guy say that,
You've prayed that before, haven't you?
no, it's the first time. No, but I've heard it. Boy, have I heard it.
Boy, have I heard it.
And that's the thing. You just lambasted a bunch of impressionable teenagers with, if you're not getting your call, you ain't hearing God.
You know what I just heard? That we have dealt with people who have called us to their institution of dead works.
That's a very complicated thing you just heard, but I hear it.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's it, man. Again, this stress and pressure that we're putting on people, especially to that end, it's shameful.
It is shameful.
And here's what I found in my own personal life. Just sit there. Just be available. And I talked about this before, but I mean that in the sense of, we have a tendency to jump in the minute God starts working because we feel like, oh, this is where he wants me to go.
Yep.
No. You're the instrument he's been using. Don't stop being what you were just being. Because he's still using that. I had a small group, and I don't know where our time is. But
Well, we're overtime. But
perfect.
That's okay.
I had a small group discipleship thing I was doing for a while, and I still am open to doing it. I just wait for the Lord to lead me to do it. But I had these 5 guys come into the house, and we sit around the fire pit. I called it the fire pit faction. Mm-hmm. Sit around the fire pit, and my goal was to help them see that they're closer to God than they realize. That was my goal. And it was not, I stated that from the very beginning. Guys, the reason we're gathering is so that you will learn you are closer to God than you realize. Now, the thing that was interesting about it is that one of the guys coming in no way had ever professed Christianity. I just invited him to come over. And it was a 12-week process. I laid out all that stuff. This is what we're going to do. And I say 12 weeks. I think it was 8 to 12 weeks. Like I said, there's no rule. And after 12 weeks, if you guys want to quit, you can. If 12 weeks you want to keep going, we can talk about that. It was one of those deals. Anyway, and I had one pastor in that group, and I just knew he's gonna. You can take the church out of the man, but you can't take the man out of the church. Whatever it is.
Whatever that is.
I knew he was gonna pastor.
Yep.
He's gonna go to pastor mode, and I had to shut him down a lot. But there was no time I had to shut him down more than when a guy said, we were at a certain point, and he said, I'm listening to you guys. It's 10 weeks in, and I'm realizing that I just really feel like I want to meet this Jesus you're talking about.
You just did.
Right. But that's the thing, right? Yeah. I didn't go into that to try to evangelize that man.
Right.
I went in that environment knowing that God was going to meet him, and he was going to meet God in a like a what do we call it, like a milestone way. Mm-hmm. That God's known him from before he was born, right?
Absolutely.
So it was just a matter of this. Again, what I said at the beginning, it was to him realizing that, right, coming to that understanding. And so, what did that pastor want to do immediately? Of course, he wants to go into Romans Road. Let's pray this prayer.
Let's pray
right?
the prayer.
And so
let's chant.
What I found so funny is, I looked at him immediately and I just held my hand up and I said, "Hold on." I didn't say it. Maybe I mouthed it or something. And this is what I said to him. I said, "Well, we will talk about that here in a little bit." I know that crawled up and down that pastor because I didn't jump on that moment.
Well, you missed an opportunity.
You're right. But what I was doing was like I was laying out that, hey, man, like that. I didn't say it that quickly. Like I affirmed what he had to say. And I said, "Man, that's awesome. That's fantastic." Right. And I said, "Here in a second, we're gonna address that because I really want you to understand who you are and where you're at." But we were in a process, and I finished that process with all the guys. And what was crazy is that pastor had a hard stop and had to leave before we got to that point, which I believe was absolutely God's intervention. And
it becomes the Franklin Graham commercial.
Sure. Yeah. And so we got to that point and we got done. And I said, first off, Rick, I want to just tell you, man, you're there. You know God. Yeah. You've been trained to not, you're learning who he is, but he's internally in you, man. Yep. He's already there. You're welcoming him in. You're now making him Lord of your life. You're walking a new path. And
it's an eternal flashpoint.
Right. Right. Again, if past and present, see, this is the thing. We will never fully fathom until we are eternal. We are eternal until we have the mind of Christ.
Right.
What it means to live outside of time. And so it really is confusing for humans to think anything but non-linearly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. When he's saying that to me, when I'm speaking, the truth I'm speaking is, dude, you from the foundation of the earth were written down in the Lamb's Book of Life, right? So you were already there.
Yeah.
This is a simple revelation of you grabbing a hold of that. And there's a lot of theology we can unpack with that.
But the point, and I want to make this point, love allows choice.
Right, 100%.
And at that point, he made a choice.
Right.
He didn't awaken to something that already existed.
Yeah.
He made a choice to receive it.
Right. And there was zero coercion.
Zero. Yes.
And that to me is the big win, right? Is that I didn't say, all right, at the end of every group, I didn't say, all right, guys,
and
bow your heads, let's say this prayer with me.
That's the arrogance behind leading people to Christ, is that I'm responsible for him to make this decision.
Yeah.
That is arrogance.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
I think it's unintentional. I really do believe that the vast majority of people that are doing these things are doing them because they were trained to.
Yeah.
And they don't have a malicious intent. It just, this is what they're trained is accurate. It's just appropriate. And so on.
And I'm going to be meaner than you.
Of course.
They are hucksters for Jesus.
Yes, that's what they're trained to do.
Yep.
I mean, I agree with you. I do agree with you. But I don't think, and I can say that because of my own journey.
Right.
I can say
and
that.
I can too.
Yeah, because I can say, okay, I never intended to push a false narrative or a false gospel.
Yep.
But I did, right? I was part of a machine that I today would consider to be reprehensible.
But I have to insert, and then we got to quit, that partial truth is still a lie.
Sure it is. And I believed the lie and shared it.
Yep.
So I would argue that I was innocent of that moment. Not free of responsibility.
Of course.
But innocent of it. Like I didn't recognize what I was doing. And that and you know, the grace of God in that, the grace that God doesn't say like, bro, I'm sorry, I just can't with you.
And
He doesn't do that.
We have a God, and then I'm going to close with this. We have a God who is not worried about us doing it wrong.
Correct.
He's not worried about flawed theology. It does not threaten him.
Right.
And so he can use somebody who is unintentionally screwing up the gospel.
Sure.
Or misusing the gospel. How's that?
I think that's the majority of those he uses.
Yeah. All right. We are so glad that you are listening to us and watching us. And I look forward to airing this podcast. It'll come out in 3 sections.
And I just want to encourage, if I said anything stupid, just ignore it.
You did not.
When I said the stupid thing.
You did not say anything stupid. I did maybe, but you didn't. All right. We're out.